All right, good morning, Financial Algebra. Today we're going to continue talking about the profit function and finding the zeros or the roots for the profit function. So first off, we're going to compare three different companies. Each of these companies have the same revenue. So if you notice, they have the same x-intercepts and they have the same vertex. The parabola is the same for all three companies. Will all three companies have the same profit? We don't know because it's dependent on the expenses. So what I'm going to do is draw in different expense graphs on top of the parabola, and we'll talk about where the profit is coming from. So the first company, I'm going to put in a line that starts kind of lower. It doesn't have to be anywhere specific, but a lower line. So this is the expense line for company A. For company B, I'm going to start it higher. And then company C is going to be way high. There we go. So each of these companies have the same revenue. What happens when we compare the expense graphs? Okay, which company has the most profit? That's a typo. Has the most profit. Well, it would be the one that has the biggest gap between the revenue and expense. So of these, which one has the biggest gap would be company A. Okay, and that's because we're comparing the gap between revenue and expense. This one is a lot larger than company B. Okay. What's company C telling us when the expense line is always above the revenue line? That's the one where we are always at a loss. We're always spending more money than what we're bringing in. So the company that has no profit is C. And that's because the revenue never exceeds the expenses. Okay. What we did yesterday on Monday was look at calculating profit from a graph. And so this is just summarizing or recapping what we did yesterday. Graphically, the profit is the vertical distance between the revenue and the expense functions. Okay, so the difference between revenue and expense is the profit. Okay, in the figure to the left, we have this line segment. So I'm going to highlight mine in pink so you can see it a little bit better. So this is the line we're talking about. The line segment hits the revenue graph at 437,500. Okay. The parabola is the revenue. So what they're telling us is this value is $437,500. Okay, that seems reasonable with the scale that we have. Okay, when the price is about 25. So at the bottom is $25. Okay, the bottom of the line segment hits the expense graph at 150,500. So the expense line is the negative sloping line. So this one is 150,500. How much profit is made? Well, what we know is that at $25 for a price, we know how much revenue we would get and how much expense we would have to pay. So profit is revenue minus expense. Okay, how much of a gap is there between these two numbers? So we would take 437,500 minus 150,500. And what we get is our answer, 286,500. So because we found the gap, or the difference between revenue and expense, that told us how much our profit was. Approximate when the profit is zero. All right, profit is zero when revenue equals expense. Okay, and that's because when you take the same number and subtract it from itself, it's going to be zero. So where revenue equals expense is at the break-even points. So what we want to do is approximate what these numbers are, okay, for the price. Let's start with the lower bound for the lower break-even. Okay, I don't know what this number is, so I need to figure that out. This is 70, and it's broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chunks. So each line must represent 10. So this line is at $10, and this break even is just a little bit shy of $10. So you could say like $8 or $9, somewhere in there would be reasonable. Okay. And then this one is pretty much right at 60. You know, it might be like $59. I can't be for certain. Okay, so on to the next page. What we're going to do is interpret what the profit function is doing. So we have the original revenue and the original expense. Okay, so here's the revenue, here's the expense line. So where is there $0 of profit? Well, the $0 of profit is at the break-evens. Okay. Now this pink graph is the new profit equation. Okay. Well, on the profit equation, when is there zero profit? Well, when it crosses the x-axis, because that would be where profit is 0. Notice how it's the same x value. So it's the same price as the break-even. Okay, we're basically taking this x-axis and or the expense line, and we're sliding it down to become the x-axis. Okay, the next question. Does max profit occur at the same price that max revenue occurs? What we found on Monday was that no, that's not true. Wherever max revenue is the maximum or the vertex of the revenue graph. And then max profit is always a little bit to the right. So they won't be the same numbers. All right, so let's look at writing a profit function. Profit is calculated by taking revenue minus expenses. Okay, the difference between revenue and expense is how we calculate profit. So we can abbreviate our calculations here to get us a formula that represents profit. Revenue is negative 500p squared plus 30,000p. So I'm going to substitute that in. Okay. Minus, and then expenses are this calculation. Negative 3,500p plus 238,000. Okay, so we took our revenue calculation and we're subtracting the expense calculation. From here we just simplify, which means distribute the negative. Okay, the first set of parentheses is just grouping to remind us where that came from. But really there's no coefficient, there's no exponent. They're kind of unnecessary. 1000p. Okay, here, if we take negative times a negative, we get a positive. So plus 3,500p. And then a negative times a positive is a negative. So minus 238,000. Okay. Our last step would be to combine like terms. The middle two terms are like terms, and that's because they both have p to the first power. So negative 500p squared plus 33,500p minus 238,000. All right, there's our new profit equation. So to write the profit equation, it's just revenue and then minus the expenses, and you simplify. This matches up with the work that you would do for numbers 1 and 2 in tonight's homework. Okay. The next question on your homework, number 3, is talking about identifying the prices that would yield no profit. Okay. Well, we would yield no profit at the x-intercepts of the profit equation. So if we're finding the x-intercepts, we're going to use the quadratic formula. Okay. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, it's a good idea to write it down in this packet because I know we did it in our last unit, but we haven't written it down in our new packet yet. Okay, so we're going to find the a, b, and c from the profit equation we just wrote. A is negative 500. B is 33,500, and C is negative 238,000. Okay, so using the quadratic formula, we're going to substitute A, B, and C into the formula. Okay, so it's the opposite of B, negative 33,500, plus or minus the square root of, and then 33,500 squared minus 4 times the A, negative 500, times C, negative 238,000. And that's all over 2A, 2 times negative 500. Okay, from here we'll simplify. We'll start with the radicand, the thing that's inside the radical. So negative 33,500 plus or minus. Go ahead and take a minute and substitute this into your calculator, and then take the square root of that number. Okay, go ahead and pause the video if you need more time. You should get 25,421 point, let's say 45. We'll round there. I think it's like 0.44764. Now we'll do the calculation one time with addition and then one time with subtraction. So one time with addition would be negative 33,500 plus 25,421.45, and then divide it by negative 1,000. If you do that, you'll get 8.08 rounded to the nearest penny. And then you'll do it a second time with subtraction, negative 33,500 minus 25,421.45, and then divide it by negative 1,000. 58.92. So these would be the two prices that yield no profit. Okay, and that's because we're finding when that profit equation is 0. These match up with our graph from here. Remember when I said approximate where profit is 0, and we said it was about $8 and then about $60? We were able to find algebraically it's exactly $8.08 and $58.92. Okay, so I'd like you from here to work on the 3.9 homework. Okay, that will be due Monday. Okay, I recommend you go back and watch this video to get more, like if I went too fast at any point, you can rewatch it, or email me with questions if you have any as well. Okay, thanks guys, I'll see you next week.